Hi, I'm Jim McLaughlin, and at Purdue University we're going to talk about occupational ergonomics and the scope of the problem and introduction to ergonomics. We're going to do this at a fairly high level just to cover the groundwork on this and to be able to set the framework for this course. Occupational ergonomics, defined, is of Greek origin, not Latin. Ergo meaning work, nomos meaning laws of. When you put the two together, the laws of work. When you define ergonomics, it is a compilation of many things into a interdisciplinary science. The assessment of human capabilities and limitations. This involves biomechanics and anthropometry. Work and environmental stresses. This is work physiology and industrial psychology. Static and dynamic forces on the human body structure. This involves biomechanics. Vigilance, which is industrial psychology. Many instances of vigilance, it would be involved with being able to detect signals versus noise over a period of time. One of the more common uses that we can point to in vigilance would be the TSA inspection officers at airports, where the ones that are looking at the scanners and trying to detect if there's something in your baggage that may not be there, that should not be there, and the need to rotate every so often in order to maintain vigilance and looking at things that are okay to pass through and things that need further inspection. Fatigue is a big factor, especially involving shift work, work physiology and industrial psychology, design, simulation, and training, and design of workstations and tools involving anthropometry and engineering aspects to this. When we look at the roots of ergonomics, it is not in many instances people look at it as a new science, and in many ways the evolution of the science has rapidly progressed in the past 70 or so years, but it really goes all the way back to the 1700s. The two factors that Ramazzini pointed out as potentially harmful are noxious vapors. These are fine particles and materials handled. This would be in mining operations and any work that would generate airborne particles that would be hazardous to breathe. And number two, violent and irregular motions in unnatural postures of the body. This is important in terms of looking at ergonomic aspects of the physical workplace in terms of the use of hand tools, chipping and carving kinds of operations which resulted in shocks to the body and regular use and overuse of these tools as it would break down the musculoskeletal system. Just a little background on Bernardo Ramazzini. The science of medicine emerged in the 17th century in Italy with his work, and he was born in 1633. Went to the University of Parma. This is where Parmesan came from, by the way. He became a doctor of philosophy and medicine in 1659, and he moved up the academic ladder there with the University of Modena, where he taught for 18 years, and then he accepted the chair of practical medicine at the University of Padua. One of the things that he's well known for is his famous book called The Disease of Workers. This is his first comprehensive work on occupational diseases, outlining the health hazards of irritating chemicals, dust, metals, and other abrasive agents encountered by workers in 52 different occupations. He died in 1714 at the ripe old age of 81. Quite remarkable because if you look at the life span at that time was about 50 years or less, and it remained so all the way up through the 1900s, and then after that through the use of antibiotics and vaccines and so on, we've been able to live longer, and also in improvements in nutrition, food, and sanitation. Just observing work activities, I show you this slide here not only to go to a site where you can see more information on it, but just looking in the background of all the moving parts and so on, and in many ways these crafts and these guilds that were of the day in terms of building and making things, where people were exposed to different hazards, and you can see right away that there's potential for serious harm to come to individuals if they got themselves caught in between moving parts of machinery and so on. Human factors and ergonomics are the same. Human factors originated in the United States and Canada. Ergonomics originated in Europe, especially in the United Kingdom. Ergonomics is becoming more universally used over human factors. The recent name change, and I would say relatively recent, back in 1993, of the American-based Human Factors Society is now the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society. In many instances, a lot of people try to separate human factors and ergonomics, where they're looking at what I call neck-up ergonomics or cognitive ergonomics. Some, those are the older school, called it human factors. And then the physical ergonomics would be neck down, if you will, in terms of movement and forces and so on. And this would be more typically called ergonomics and not the cognitive aspects. But I just tend to separate the two as cognitive ergonomics and physical ergonomics. Some years ago, a lot of people associated human factors with cognitive aspects of ergonomics. Major disciplines contributing to ergonomics. Remember that ergonomics is interdisciplinary, and this is a very short list of those things that you need to have background in order to achieve competence in this area: mathematics, psychology, chemistry, biological sciences, engineering and technology, physics, and epidemiology. All these things feed into the understanding, use, and application of ergonomics in the sciences and engineering today. The main objective of ergonomics is to achieve an optimal relationship between people and their work environment. So I refer to this as the sweet spot between the human and the machine. The more you can overlap the two, the more harmony there is between the human interaction and the machine performance. And in the work environment, this is one of the goals that we try to achieve in every aspect of making the science, the interdisciplinary science of ergonomics, work for us. Workplace hazards all apply here if you think about ergonomics, but a lot of people think that it's only limited to the physical hazards of the workplace. Physical hazards could be noise, vibration, light, radiation. Chemical hazards, we tend to think of things like airborne dust that could be toxic, solvents, vapors, gases, and so on. Biologic hazards, we can deal with viruses and bacteria, mold, fungus, and so on. But realize that there's a relationship to all of these where ergonomics applies, especially in exposure assessment and controls, and that in many instances, a lot of people think ergonomics is controlled in the physical spectrum, but I would like you to consider ergonomic applications in all three areas: physical, chemical, and biological. Results of ergonomic applications. One, we want to understand the type of work on the workers' bodies and their job performance. We want to predict long-term, the called cumulative effects of work on workers' bodies. We want to assess fitness of the workplace or tools to workers and job performance. This is a very important concept when we talk about fitness, because it's not about the fitness of the worker. It's really the design, function, and order of the workplace, or fitness of the workplace, as it is adaptable to workers and how they perform their jobs. In other words, we're designing things to optimize human performance rather than trying to look at the individual to optimize work outcomes based upon what they're given. Improvement of productivity and well-being of workers by fitting the task to the person and not the person to the task. A very important concept here, because we're not looking for sizing up somebody to do a particular job, but designing the job in such a way that any person can perform the work that's needed. Establishment of a knowledge base support for designers, engineers, and medical personnel for improving the productivity and well-being of individuals. Very important to have a repository of information where people, especially the ergonomist and those in health and safety, can go to be able to use, perhaps not reinventing the wheel, by being able to select maybe designs or applications or case studies that have shown to be effective and used perhaps in the same way or in a new way, a translational way to the job at hand. Basic terminology, terms used in describing the relationship between the body parts and joint movements. First is anatomy. That's that branch of science that deals with the body's structures, including muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments, and other structures. Physiology, the science of the body's functions, including metabolism, muscle mechanics, oxygen, nutrient distribution, temperature regulation, nerve transmission, cognition, and other functional activities. The skeletal system provides mechanical levers whose movements are accomplished by contraction and also relaxation of the muscles. The skeletal system consists of bones and cartilage, joints formed by their attachments to each other through connective tissue, bone, cartilage, and hemopoietic, those blood-forming cells. The body has 206 bones. Important a fact to know. Our classification of those bones, we have long bones and short bones, flat bones, irregular bones. Example of long bones would be your arms and legs, for example, the humerus, radius, and ulna in the arms. And if you look at the long bones in the legs, for example, the tibia and the fibula, those are great examples of the long bones and their use and function. Short bones would be things such as your kneecaps, your the carpal bones in the hands, the bones in the feet. Flat bones would be the scapulae and those in the skull. Irregular bones, this would be those that would form the spine, for example. All each has form and function, and in studying bones and structure, it's fun to see design and form following function in terms of each one of these series of bones in the body and what they do. Here's just a series of bones as we name them on the body, such as the humerus, radius, and ulna, as I mentioned, the iliac, the iliac crest on the pelvis, the femur, of course, the upper part of the leg, and the tibia and fibula, as I mentioned earlier, the patellas, the kneecap, and the scapulae, the flat bones, the clavicle is irregular bones, and all of these bones, about 206, form the body in terms of its function. For example, the bones that form the rib cage. These are shaped in such a way as to protect the vital organs of the chest, but also stabilize the spine. It's one of the reasons why we don't find very many injuries in the thoracic area of the spine, is because they are attached to the spinal column in that area, and they all move as one unit when we turn and twist, as opposed to the lumbar area, the lower part of the spine, or the cervical area of the upper part of the spine, which are more unstable. The gross skeletal structure, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton, as we see right here, we're really looking at the spine and the rib cage and the skull on the appendicular side, and the upper and lower limbs. Appendicular skeleton being the upper and lower limbs, and the axial skeleton being the spinal column, the ribs, and the head. There are other ways in which this is presented in terms of defining the axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton, but these are the two basic classifications between the two. Functions of the bones. Obviously, they support the body's framework, provides a shell, protect the vital organs such as a rib cage, allows movement of the body, houses bone marrow. We're looking at what produces the white blood cells, stores calcium and phosphorus. The greatest calcium and phosphorus reserves of the body are in the bones. When we look at cartilage, we're dealing with supporting body structure, avascular, three types of cartilage. The hyaline, covering where the bones join. Obviously that provides cushion and movement without pain. The fibrous, this would be your rib cage and intervertebral disc. And the elastic cartilage, which would be formed for our ears and for our nose. Joint articulations, the junction between two or more bones. Diarthrosis and synarthrosis. The diarthrosis has a joint cavity, ball and socket, and hinge joints. The synarthrosis, no joint cavity. An example would be the skull. For diarthrosis, we're looking at the shoulder joints, for example, ball and socket, and the elbow and the wrist as hinge joints. And these are examples of the ball and socket and hinge joints right here. One of the reasons why it takes so much longer for the shoulder to heal is the axis of movement X, Y, and Z versus an XY movement of a hinge joint like the elbow. Joint movements on diarthrosis, we have extension and flexion. Flexion brings the joints closer to the body. Extension takes the joints further from each other. Abduction means to bring toward, adduction away from. Circumduction is movement or rotation around in a circle where it forms from an apex to the movement of a cone. So this would be, let's say, moving your arm as it sticks straight out from the side of your body in a circular way. The arm, the hands forming the cone circle. It could be clockwise or counterclockwise. The apex coming up right to the shoulder joint. Rotation would be twisting, let's say on the spine, so you're rotating from one side to the other. And pronation, supination, this would be dealing with facing up or down. Pronation, this concept would be for hands facing or the palms facing down. Supination with the palms facing up. And a lot of times I remember supination as holding a bowl of your hands in the form of a soup bowl, so the hands are facing upward, so the supination seems to work, at least in my mind. And these are examples of flexion extension, also with the hands, thumbs flexion extension, shoulder flexion and extension forward and back. All these are movements which are risk factors. If done repeatedly, that can lead to cumulative trauma disorders. These are also other movements here in terms of abduction and adduction, away from and toward, shoulder vertical abduction, and then dividing the body into three distinct planes. The coronal plane, that's front to back, so the front half of the body, the back half of the body. The transverse plane divides the body from the upper to the lower, and then the most important one in terms of this course is the median sagittal plane, dividing the body in half from left to right. And this comes up quite often in dealing with biomechanical modeling, where the mid-sagittal plane facing directly forward would be 0 in terms of degrees on a compass. Rotating to the left at a right angle would be 90 degrees, rotating to the right at 90 degrees, and then back to the center at 0. So all referenced usually from the mid-sagittal plane. Back structure is made of muscles, bones, vertebrae and their processes, intervertebral disc, ligaments, tendons, spinal cord, and branch nerves. 33 bones in the vertebrae. Some have 34, an extra bone there, but 33 is what people typically have. 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 4 or 5 coccygeal vertebrae. When the spine is in natural position, it forms 3 natural curves in double S shape. The vertebrae has 3 bony appendages on each side. The spinal cord passes through the spine and branches out nerves at each vertebra. These nerves carry instructions and signals back and forth between the brain and the body. The spine segments, then, we have C1 through 7. That's the framework for the neck. The thoracic, 1 through 12, is the framework for the thorax and ribs. L1 through L5, that's the lower back. And sacral, S1 through 5. These are fused bones, so they're all together. They're not freely articulating. And these are known as the sacrum and the coccygeal, C1, C4. Sometimes there's a fifth in there. These are also fused bones known as the coccyx. So in the intervertebral disc, this is obviously to separate the vertebrae, composed of tough fibrous ring. It's filled with a viscous fluid. Consistency is much like crab meat in terms of its texture, not like jelly that it's under pressure and can pop or rupture, causing back pain. So that's one of the reasons why in many instances it's recommended that you don't have surgery, that you stop what you're doing that's causing the problem and let the body try to heal itself. These discs also act as shock absorbers between the vertebrae. They provide flexibility for the vertebrae. And the most fragile parts of the spine, especially that of the lumbar region, is an area of focus for this course because that's where most of the injuries occur. Why? Because this is where the weight and where the spine is least stable in terms of material handling. The disc, the interior, does not have a blood supply. It's fed by diffusion through fibrous outer ring. The pressure on the disc creates a diffusion gradient from the interior to the exterior, so it squeezes out the contaminated fluids, and the gradient is reversed, taking the nutrients in. So there's no active pump there. It's really from our own movement as we sit, stand, and move around that the nutrients are brought in and the waste products are reversed and taken away. To keep discs in good condition, they should be subjected to frequent changes in pressure, meaning you don't always stay in one position for extended periods of time. That's why for some people these long flights on airplanes and so on can be pretty disastrous because you are putting high pressure in one place for a long time. This is pictures of the spinal column, looking at the front view, the back view, and the side view being over on the far right. And you can see its structure and the disc and the appendages associated with it. And this is a detail of the spinal column where we've taken individual discs and where we're looking at this information in terms of its spongy formations between the disc to make it strong but lightweight. We see this center hole right here is where the spinal cord passes through, and then the spiny processes, 3 spiny processes on each side of the spine that you can actually feel with your hand if you run it across your back. Closer inspection of this shows a detail of the spinal cord. Notice these are several smaller cords that are together and to form a larger bundle. More interestingly is that the cell structure is different depending on where you are in the spinal cord, that the cells that conduct and send signals up in the cervical area are different than they are in the thoracic and different than they would be in the lumbar area. So if someone severs their spinal cord, it's not a matter of reattaching it like it's an electrical conduit that could be plugged back in again because of the specialized cell function and location of signals throughout the spinal column. If someone does suffer an injury, they usually don't get all those resources back because of the peculiarities with different cell types in the spinal column. And this is what it's a cadaver image of what the intervertebral disc looks like. This is viewed from the top, and you can see that this is not a jelly-like substance or an air pocket. It is more like crab meat in terms of its firmness and texture. And this shows the spinal cord as it comes out toward the end. And this number of common nerve ends is known as the cana equata, or the cauda equina, which is translated as horse's tail. It's It's a very complex nerve system sending signals to and from the body in terms of function. So work-related injuries occur in the lumbar spine. The focus is between the fifth lumbar and the first sacral vertebrae, so that's a very high injury area, at least potential injury area. Then the second most common is between the L4 and the L5. So if you're suffering an injury, look at those two places first. You're going to see that more commonly there than just about anywhere else. And if we study compressive and shear forces of the spine using biomechanical models, this helps health and safety professionals understand and reduce man and materials handling risk factors. Another view of the spine, as we showed earlier, showed the S-shaped curve of the spine itself, the natural curve. The idea is to preserve that spine and maintain those postures is sitting as well as standing over time to avoid back stress. As we switch our attention to the hand, there are 28 total bones in the hand and wrist, 12 phalanges in the fingers, 2 in the thumb, 5 metacarpal bones in the palm, 8 carpal bones in the wrist, 1 sesamoid bone located at the head of the thumb, the metacarpal. This shows the arm, right here, the humerus, radius and ulna, the carpal bones in the hand, the metacarpals, the base really forming the palm of the hand, and the phalanges, the fingertips, and the joints of the thumb. And each one of these bones has a specific function in order to provide strength and flexibility of the hand to perform its job. The carpal bones and the carpal tunnel. The carpal bones form a small U-shaped tunnel in the palmar side of the wrist. The tunnel is covered by a transverse carpal ligament. This is very much like a belt across your trousers and holding everything together. And a lot of times what they do in surgery is they'll cut that transverse ligament, release the pressure through that tunnel, and stop compressing the median nerve, which in turn lets the pain go away. The problem now is that you have a very unstable structure around the wrist because that transverse ligament has now been cut, and it takes time for it to fuse back together again. And sometimes the scar tissue will form more pressure than before, causing additional problems. So very careful decision one has to make in terms of getting carpal surgery, carpal tunnel surgery, because of the outcomes not always being guaranteed in terms of reducing pain, numbness, and tingling of the hands and fingers as a result of compression of that median nerve. So just a close-up of the hand and the carpal bones that are in the hand and the phalanges as they would function. The foot is important. There are 26 bones in the foot, 14 phalanges, 5 metacarpals, 3 cuneiforms, 1 navicular, 1 cuboid, 1 talus, and 1 calcaneus. I apologize for that. As we can see with the lower limbs right here, you have the femur, the tibia and the fibula, and then at the base of the foot around the ankle, all the supporting bones. The bones, while we're looking at pressure right here and stability, as opposed to hands being used for manipulating and holding objects, that the foot is a mobile, weight-bearing structure, has large tarsal bones and short phalanges. It's maintained by ligaments and muscles, and ligaments are bone to bone, by the way, whereas tendons are bone to muscle. Has got 2 arches, longitudinal and transverse. The longitudinal arch transmits the forces of the body and the weight to the ground and to the great toe, which creates a lever system giving the body locomotion. The great toe is very, very important, and used to be in the old days, if someone escaped a chain gang in a prison system, that a lot of times the caretakers of those prisons would issue a punishment of chopping off the great toes, and because they couldn't use it to leverage their weight and force during running, they couldn't run very fast or very far. So a very crude and barbaric way of dealing with this issue, but it does point to the importance of the great toe in terms of locomotion and its uses as a lever system for moving the body forward. And this is just a view of the foot and seeing all the bones. Notice that they're much larger, and this is obviously to account for the load-bearing aspects of the foot. Excuse me. 5 websites you can find useful for doing your research. The Centers for Disease Control, that's a CDC site at the top. Next, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. The third is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. Fourth is the Human Factors Ergonomic Society. And fifth is the American Industrial Hygiene Association. Note the differences between gov and org, those being organizations, others being government-oriented. Each one will lead you to an enterprise of information that you might find very useful in conducting some of your research or just learning more about ergonomics postings on these various sites. That's the end of the lecture. Please stay up with your readings in the book Occupational Ergonomics, 2nd edition, by Drs. Amit Bhattacharya and James McLaughlin. I'm Jim McLaughlin from Purdue University. Thank you for your time and attention.